That is just tasty, tasty, delicious honey. So good, so yummy, yummy, yummy.
I am a surgeon!
The Spiderwick Chronicles. You guys remember this series at all? I know I for sure do because I remember having multiple copies when I was a kid, mainly because of the covers. For whatever reason, these covers stuck out to me. Maybe because they have like a really nice pastel color that kind of reminds me of Easter a little bit. I mean, you guys see that at all? I mean, Easter has pastel colors, these books have pastel colors. It's just a pastel world, I guess. Another reason why I remember these covers is because they have really cool illustrations on each of the covers that also reminded me of Harry Potter for some reason. I mean, the illustrations look kind of the same, and the main kid in book number 1 kind of looks like Harry Potter.
It's the same thing, Greg and Tim.
I mean, other than it looking pretty cool, I mean, they were also a touch bit ominous, so as a kid, I mean, I was all in for it. Also, look at this guy right here. Looks crazy, right? Also, the name itself, Spiderwick Chronicles. I mean, that just sounds cool. This is before even John Wick was a thing that made the word Wick even cool. So John Wick and spiders, I'm all for it, man.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
So I personally don't remember a single thing from what happened within these books. I don't even remember reading the story at all, but I do know there was also a movie adaptation, I think in like the early 2000s, that I also did not watch. And apparently there's going to be a new like TV show adaptation that I thought was going to be on Disney Plus, but no, it's going to be on Roku TV. So we'll see how that goes. So why do I not remember reading these books? Well, I can't really tell you, so what we're going to do here is we're going to read book number 1 called The Field Guide in the Spiderwick Chronicles to see, is it any good? So if you're ready to join me down nostalgia lane, let's go check out The Field Guide, book number 1 in the Spiderwick Chronicles. Alright, this is a book that came out in 2003 by authors Holly Black and Tony DiTerlizzi. And in terms of the book cover, we have this very nice pastel looking blue that covers the entire book. Also, we have this very striking Spiderwick font at the very top, which looks pretty cool. And also some kids looking at a book, which you really don't see nowadays, right? Also, for whatever reason, this book looks like it's glowing. I mean, you see that, right? And you cannot tell me this kid right here does not look like Harry Potter. I mean, come on. Also, I want to make a quick note here as well. Each of these books in the series are pretty short. I mean, I think they're around the 100-page mark, with book number 1 being only 114 pages. So I was able to get through it pretty quickly, you know, with me being an adult and this being a kid's book. I would hope that it would go by pretty quickly. So when I first opened to this book, I quickly found out why it drew in so many kids. Because this book is just filled to the brim of illustrations. There's tons of them in here. And really, they just help paint a better picture of the world that these authors are trying to portray within this series. Now, the way the book starts off, not the actual story, the book starts off with a handwritten note to us, the readers, so the people who are reading it, in terms of where the story was inspired by the authors. And that really came from a letter handed to them from 3 kids who told them of this whole magical world filled with fairies and magic and other things and creatures that has been under our noses this entire time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I am a surgeon!
Now, the way that the story actually starts off, it kind of reminds me of another kid's series called Goosebumps. Actually, I have a video on it if you want to go check that out after this, but in that video, I covered a book called Welcome to Dead House. And Spiderwick, the Field Guide, feels a little bit similar to Welcome to Dead House. Because when we actually start the story within this first book, we have a group of kids, a family, moving to a new, spooky, big ol' house. In Goosebumps, Welcome to Dead House, we also have a family, a group of kids, moving to a spooky, big ol' house. Sounds a little bit familiar. The new house, for instance. Jared Grace looked up at it and squinted. Maybe it would look better blurry. It's a shack, Miller said, getting out of the station wagon. It wasn't really, though. It was more like a dozen shacks had been piled on top of one another. There were several chimneys, and the whole thing was topped off by a strip iron fence setting on the roof like a particularly garish hat. The reason why they're moving to this decrepit big old house is because a long, not-so-lost relative is offering them to stay here, which is also pretty similar to Welcome to Dead House and Goosebumps. Another reason why that the family is moving to this new house is because the dad, I guess, left the family and left them in a not-so-good spot, and reason unknown at the moment, but the family, the kids, the mom had to move to this house. So I think it's really intriguing how this kid's book pulls in a really heavy topic of divorce into the story and how the family dynamics change after this divorce takes place. Now, with the family finally moving into this big spooky house, some spooky things start happening, which is also similar to Welcome to Dead House and Goosebumps. But luckily, this is basically where the similarities stop. The house, by the way, is humongous. The kids actually get lost a little bit going into this house and venturing into it for the first time. And they don't explore a lot of the rooms early on within the story. Mom? Although he meant to call out loudly, his voice sounded very soft, even to himself. Mom? No answer. He took a tentative step, and then another, until the creak of the board under his feet stopped him. Just as he paused, something inside the wall rustled. He could hear it scrabbling upward, until the sound disappeared past the ceiling. His heart beat hard against his chest. So a few days passes, and they really just hear this weird rustling or tussling sound within the walls, and the kids decide to go check it out because they think maybe it's a squirrel. So they get to a spot on the wall where they think the squirrel is hiding out, and they decide to punch a hole in the wall. And in that hole, they find some pretty unusual stuff. The remains of curtains, bits of tattered silk and lace, straight pins poked into the wooden beams on either side, making a strange upward snaking line. A doll's head lolled in one corner. Dead cockroaches were strung up like garlands. Tiny lead soldiers with melted hands and feet were scattered across the planks like a fallen army. Jagged pieces of mirror glittered from where they had been glued with ancient gum. And in this part of the story, they actually find an old dumbwaiter, and they decide, you know what, let's stuff one of the kids in there and pull them up and see where it goes. Now, I have a distinct feeling that this would be a no-no situation in almost any horror film or any horror book. But you know what, the kids decide, let's go check it out, see what's up there, and hopefully don't die. So the kid eventually does make it to the very top. He finds a weird, kind of creepy room with a big old painting of someone in the center of the room as well. There's a huge desk, there's more paintings on the wall, there's books scattered everywhere, and jars filled with some weird type of stuff in it as well. And also, there's a poem. In a man's torso you will find my secret to all mankind. If false and true can be the same, you will know soon of my fame. Up and up and up again, good luck, dear friend. Then, in Paranormal Activity, something is written in the dust. Click, clack, watch your back. Click, clack, watch your back.
Click, clack, watch your back.
So yeah, if it was me, I think it would be time to hightail it out of there right away. But, you know, in the book sense, they don't do it. Of course, like in any horror film, they don't do what you want them to do. So a few more days passes, and some more kind of creepy, weird stuff happens, like one of the kids' hair being tied to a bed frame. You know, normal stuff. Then one of our main characters, Jared, decides to venture up the stairs, which he's not been up before, in the hopes that this poem will actually be like a treasure map, leading him to somewhere that has an item or something up there that this poem was leading him towards. But for all we know, as readers, this poem could be leading him straight to
hell.
But it doesn't, so don't worry. He actually finds a big old trunk, and inside that trunk he finds a book called Arthur Spiderwick's Field Guide to the Fantastical World Around You. No, not Harry Potter's Fantastic Beast. This is Spiderwick, okay? So Jared opens this book up, and he quickly finds out this is not a typical chapter book or a kid's illustrated book at all. The strangest thing, however, was the subject matter. The book was full of information about fairies. Jared is super interested in this book, and he constantly reads through it, but the other kids, they could care less about this stupid baby book. But we do find out that the relative who's allowing him to stay in this house, their surname is Spiderwick. Interesting. So Jared keeps reading through this book, just taking in all the pages, and eventually he does make headway in making his brother and sister believe him a little bit more. Eventually he gets to a page where it outlines a creature called boggarts. Boggarts. Little nasty creatures that love bringing a lot of chaos. Jared flipped to the page that read, Boggarts delight in tormenting those they once protected and will cause milk to sour, doors to slam, dogs to go lame, and other malicious mischief. So Jared has an idea that actually came from the book, and a way to prove that this boggart was real by spreading flour all across the floor in the hopes to get its footprints in the flour. But that plan kind of backfires, and it only creates a little bit more headache for him. Up, Jared, his mother said. You want to pretend you don't know? Fine, let's go downstairs so you know what's going on. The kitchen was a mess. Mallory had a broom and was sweeping up broken pieces of a porcelain bowl. The walls were painted with a chocolate syrup and orange juice. Raw eggs oozed down the window panes. But, there was little footprints in the flour, but no one believed him. They all thought that Jared did it himself. Again, another horror trope where someone is pleading and just begging for someone to believe them, but no one does. The mom thinks that Jared is just acting out because of the divorce, but really, it is a boggart. So Jared does a little bit more pleading with his brother and sister, and eventually they do cave in, allowing him to be pulled up into that creepy room again through the dumbwaiter. So they actually did bring up a birdhouse to be used as a new home, because they thought that them destroying that wall earlier was them destroying its home, so they brought up this birdhouse in the hopes to make amends with the boggart, and also leaving a note saying that they're sorry. So then a few days go by where there's no crazy antics at all, but they do find that this note is gone. The note's gone, announced Simon. Did you take it? Mallory asked Jared. No, Jared insisted. There was a loud sound of a throat being cleared, and the three turned toward the desk. Standing on it, in worn overalls and a wide-brimmed hat, was a little man about the size of a pencil. His eyes were black as beetles, his nose was large and red, and he looked very like the illustration from the guide. He was holding a pair of leashes that attached to two gray mice sniffing the edge of the desk. So this little pencil-sized creature might scare normal people, but to these kids, they seem a little bit confused, really. Then the boggart, starts talking to them, telling them that they should stop fiddling with this book, because this book will only lead them to harm. Then it scuttles away somewhere into the house. Mallory's voice was weird. I was just looking. I mean, this is a big book. It wasn't a small book. Yeah, I guess. And all these entries, all these things are real? Jared, that's a lot of real. And then suddenly, Jared understood what she was saying. If you looked at it that way, it was a big book. An absolutely huge book, too large to even comprehend, and worst of all, they were only at the beginning. The end. Yeah, so this is how book number 1 ends. So really, the first Spiderwick book, the field guide, not too much happens. I mean, it could basically be summarized into 4 sentences. Family moves in the creepy house. Weird things start happening inside the house. Kid finds a book that's connected to an old relative. Magical creatures are real. So as an adult, there is a lot to be desired here in terms of a full-fledged out story, but there are other books. But me as a kid, I just read a 100-page book that was full of illustrations, so most likely, I would be happy. I didn't like how it did involve adult themes like divorce, and we did get limited character development from each of these characters being unique and have their own little quirks. But really, it just barely opened your mind in terms of what you can expect within this world, because we really only got to see one creature, the boggart.
Goblins are here!
So that is the field guide, book number 1 in the Spiderwick Chronicles. Do you guys remember the series at all? Do you remember that book at all? Should I continue into book number 2? Let me know down below by a like or a comment, because it would help me out a lot in terms of gauging interest. Also, is that movie adaptation any good? I might check it out. Also, for sticking around this long, you've earned 1 XP token, and if you're already a subscriber, you get an extra XP token, so here you go. Have a good one, keep reading, and peace.